The chamber shimmered like a frozen cathedral, its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed with pale blue light. Lieutenant James Rohr stood alone in the center, a single human amid towering alien figures, robed in iridescent fabric. Their eyes, ranging in hues of amethyst and sapphire, reflected the cold judgment of their race. The air was frigid biting, even through his uniform, and yet the Thallin delegate stood motionless, unaffected. He forced himself not to shiver, not to betray weakness. The charges had been read with clinical detachment, espionage, cultural desecration, breach of diplomatic conduct. All for one picture, just one taken during the temple tour. A shard of sacred crystal had caught the light just right, and James had instinctively raised his scanner. Now it had come to this. He turned as the chief arbiter finished speaking in that musical, crystalline cadence the Thallin were known for. The human has trespassed upon that which is considered hallowed. Per our accords, the punishment for such offense is permanent containment. Permanent. The word echoed like a death sentence. James swallowed hard. It was a misunderstanding, he said, stepping forward, his voice clouding in the frozen air. I was told the temple was part of the diplomatic itinerary. No one warned me. You were told silence. The voice cut across the chamber. Like a silk-edged blade, all eyes turned toward the elevated dais, where she stood, Princess Thalexa. She wore no crown, no insignia, yet her presence ruled the space with effortless grace. Her skin was pale lavender, almost translucent in the crystalline light, and her long dark curls framed the face that seemed carved from amethyst and fire. Eyes the color of starlit ice bore into him, unreadable, unblinking. James straightened. Instinctively. She was beautiful, yes, but also something else dangerous in the way of ancient myths and frozen seas. Thalexa, the arbiter intoned, bowing slightly. As first blood and heir, do you speak on behalf of the royal line? I do, she said, stepping forward, her voice calm, almost bored. The council may see this as a violation, but I see ignorance. There was a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. Displeased and shocked, Doc James stared at her. Was she defending him? He is no spy, she continued, descending the steps. With deliberate grace. Merely an undisciplined emissary. Still, his actions demand consequence. She stopped before him, closer than propriety should allow. Her scent was like frost and crushed violets. I invoke the right of royal custody, she declared, eyes never leaving his. Gasps. Audible outrage. Even the chief arbiter looked scandalized. That law has not been invoked in centuries. She finished. Yes, and yet it remains valid. James opened his mouth. Wait, what does that mean? She turned to him, and for the first time, her voice lowered into something more intimate, less public, more dangerous. It means your life is no longer theirs to take. It belongs to me, now. He blinked. So, what? I'm your prisoner? You are in my care, she said, as if correcting a foolish child. Then she leaned in just slightly, and though her face remained impassive, her words curled around him like silk. You'll stay in my quarters, she said, and you will keep me warm. The crystalline corridor stretched out before James, like the throat of some ancient beast, narrow, glowing faintly, and cold enough that his breath came out in plumes. 2 Thallin guards flanked him, silent and statuesque, their pale armor refracting the bioluminescence of the walls. Their footfalls made no sound, yet every step echoed in his ears, like a heartbeat counting down to something he didn't understand. He had expected a cell, a dungeon, an interrogation room at best. Not this. Princess Thalexa walked ahead of him, her posture perfect, her robes of sheer silver glinting like frost under starlight. She hadn't spoken since the council chamber, but once, just once, she had turned her head to glance back at him. Her eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Not with anger. Not even with judgment. Curiosity. That unnerved him more than the accusation of espionage. When they reached a wide door carved from glacial crystal and veined with soft pulses of blue light, the guard stopped. Alexa placed her hand against a biomorphic panel. The door shimmered, then dissolved. Her quarters were nothing like he'd imagined. There was no sterile alien minimalism, no militaristic symmetry. Instead, the room exhaled warmth by design, if not temperature. Thick white. Furs blanketed the floor like snow. Translucent tapestries hung from the walls, depicting icy mountain ranges under twin moons. A bed of impossible scale rested on a raised platform, piled high with thermal drapery, its canopy glowing faintly with threads of silver. Every surface sparkled like it had been cut from frozen stars, and it was still cold enough to sting the tips of his ears. "You will not attempt to leave," Alexa said, stepping into the center of the room with a grace that was entirely unhurried. "The chamber's locks respond only to my signature." James nodded. "I figured. You'll find warmth under the furs. Enough to survive, barely." He took a breath, trying to make sense of this sudden shift in roles from diplomat to criminal now, guest, pet, a specimen under royal watch. "And how long am I expected to stay?" "That depends," she said, turning to face him fully, "on whether your ignorance proves to be innocent or dangerous. Do you really think I'm a spy?" She tilted her head. "No, but the council does, and their fears are not easily soothed." James stared at her, unsure if he should feel relief or dread. "Then why save me?" The corners of her mouth curved, ever so slightly. "Because I don't like waste." She moved past him then, walking to a wall-mounted console and dimming the crystalline light until only the soft glow of the bed's canopy remained. The cold pressed in instantly, sharper now. There will be no attendance. No heat until the ship's systems are restored. "We are in lockdown until the solar storm passes," she said over her shoulder. "Do not mistake this arrangement for comfort." James crossed his arms, his breath fogging. "And what do you call it?" Her eyes met his, and this time there was no hiding the strange emotion behind them. Interest, hunger, loneliness that had learned how to wear armor. "Observation," she said simply. "We have never studied your kind in prolonged proximity before. Consider it an opportunity." "For who?" "For both of us," she answered. "Rest. We will speak more in the morning. Until then." She reached for the wall control, and with a soft pulse, the door sealed behind her with no visible seam. James stood alone now, surrounded by opulence, silence, and cold that felt too alive. He moved to the bed reluctantly and sat down. The furs were warm, yes, but insufficient for what this room withheld. As he pulled one over his shoulders, he glanced at the spot where the princess had stood, still hearing her final words echo through the frost-laced air. "You will keep me warm." He lay down slowly, unsure whether he was truly a guest of the most luxurious prisoner in the galaxy. The silence on the Fallon Royal cruiser was absolute, broken only by the low hum of emergency systems trying and failing to compensate for the solar storm. Lieutenant James Rohr lay beneath a mountain of furs, but the cold had found him anyway, threading icy fingers through the seams of the warmth he clutched. His limbs ached from the chill, his nose burned with every breath, and his thoughts were louder than ever in the stillness. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, they opened again to frost, forming on the corners of the crystalline walls. The ship's internal temperature, already punishing to humans, had dropped even further during the night. The Phalin were adapted for this environment, but even they had limits. He couldn't help but wonder what those limits were. Asterisk, and what would happen when they reached them? A soft chime startled him. The door dissolved with a whisper. Princess Thalexa stood there, her robes clutched tightly at her throat, the normally fluid elegance of her posture visibly tense. Her lavender skin was slightly paler, lips tinged with blue. She stepped in, but the way she moved measured and slower betrayed her condition. James sat up instantly, furs tumbling off his shoulders. Princess? She didn't answer, right? Away. Instead, she looked at him like he was a heat source in the shape of a man. Her arms hugged her torso beneath her robes, and her breath was visible in the air. Solar storm damage is worse than projected, she said, her voice low, the ever-present melody in it dulled by fatigue. The outer coils overloaded. We've lost the primary heating grid. The engineers are attempting a reroute. How long until it's fixed? Her silence was answer enough. I see, James said, rising to his feet. The furs slipped off. Him completely now, revealing the standard issue undershirt of his uniform. Thin and woefully inadequate. You should sit down. You're shaking. I'm not. She started to say it, but her body betrayed her. A tremor ran through her shoulders like a ripple across still water. She inhaled sharply and moved further inside the room, the door. Sealing once more behind her. James hesitated, then picked up one of the heavier fur blankets and approached her slowly. Here. Alexa regarded him warily, but didn't resist when he draped it over her shoulders. Their hands brushed. Her skin was shockingly cold. Beneath the noble bearing and pride, her body was failing. You can't maintain core temperature. Can you? He asked gently. I'm adapted for cold, she said. But this isn't cold. This is death at the door. Then we need to conserve heat. He gestured to the bed. We should get under the furs together. Body heats. Our best chance. Her eyes narrowed. Pride and necessity locked in battle on her face. That would be improper. James raised a brow. I'm your prisoner. What's more improper than that? Her lips pressed into a thin line. He softened. I won't. Make it weird. You need warmth. I can give it, nothing more. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with that same regal precision, she crossed the room and slipped beneath the layered furs. James followed, lying beside her, but not touching at first. The cold crept between them like a ghost. It whispered into the spaces between their limbs, their backs, their breath. Minutes passed. Then an hour. It was unbearable. Finally, Alexa shifted. Her voice came so softly, it nearly disappeared into the stillness. Your body temperature. It runs higher than ours. It's called being warm-blooded, James replied. Our bodies fight to maintain internal heat. She hesitated. Would it help if I were closer? James didn't move. I think it's the only thing that will. Her pride cracked with the sound of shifting silk. She turned, slid across the thin divide between them, and pressed her body cautiously against his. Her skin was cold ice on muscle, but not for long. She let out a shuddering breath, and James felt it melt against his neck. Her head nestled. Beneath his chin, one hand resting against his chest, long fingers trembling faintly. Tell me, she whispered, what it feels like to live somewhere warm. So he did. He told her about the sunburnt streets of New Sydney, about beaches where the sand burned your feet, about sweating in the summer, about laying in the grass on a too hot day, cicadas humming, the world alive with warmth. Alexa closed. Her eyes, her lashes brushed his neck. It sounds like a dream, she murmured. We have beauty in ice, but never warmth. James held her a little closer. Then maybe it's time you experienced it. She didn't reply. But her breath evened out. And for the first time since his capture, James didn't feel like a prisoner. He felt like a reason to live. Asterisk. James wasn't sure when it changed. Maybe it was the moment her head pressed, fully beneath his chin, and he instinctively adjusted his arm around her waist. Or maybe it was when she exhaled, long and soft, as though releasing years of burden into the safety of his embrace. Either way, the silence that followed was no longer the cold emptiness of isolation, but something warmer, denser, a cocoon of shared breath and trembling barriers. Outside, the solar storm raged. Inside, James lay awake, heart thundering beneath. Princess Thalexa's long, delicate fingers, her body, once rigid with royal restraint, had softened slowly through the hours. First, it had been practical. She needed warmth. She needed proximity. She needed him. But now, the way her hand rested, over his heart, almost protective, almost curious, spoke of something no longer practical, no longer survival. Intimate. James stared at the ceiling above, where faint blue fractal patterns pulsed with the failing energy grid. He didn't dare speak, didn't dare move. But he also didn't dare ignore the sensation building like quiet pressure behind his ribs. She shifted slightly. Her thigh brushed his. Her breath warmed the hollow of his throat. "You're awake," she whispered. His voice was barely more than breath. "So are you." Thalexa drew back just far enough to look at him. Even in the dim glow, her features were stark in their beauty, sharp cheekbones, starlit eyes, curls tangled around her temples. Her lavender skin was warmer now, faintly flushed. "I've never shared a bed," she said. "Not like this," James swallowed. "I figured royalty doesn't do." "Sleepovers." She arched a brow. "Sleepovers? Earth thing. It's when people share space, time, maybe secrets. Usually ends in pillow fights or bad movies." She blinked slowly. "Humans are very strange." He smiled despite himself. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She hesitated. "It isn't," she murmured. "It's just new, unpredictable, alive." The silence deepened. But it wasn't awkward. It was weighty, charged, as if one wrong word might shatter the fragile peace they'd built. Alexa's gaze lingered on his lips, longer than she intended. James saw it, felt it. And still he waited. "I've never been allowed to be." "Curious," she said quietly, almost like confessing to the stars. "Everything I do is duty, cold calculation, precision. But you burn." James's breath caught. "And that scares you?" "Yes." Her eyes met his. "Because I want to touch it, and I don't know what it will do to me." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he raised his hand slowly, deliberately, and brushed his knuckles along her jaw. Her skin felt like silk just kissed by warmth. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. And then, very gently, their mouths met. It was not the kind of kiss James had imagined stealing from a princess. It wasn't bold or desperate. It was slow, careful, as though both were searching for something lost and sacred. Between them, when they parted, she lingered, eyes closed, lips parted. "I should not have done that," she whispered. "You did," he said. "So did I." She opened her eyes. "This can't happen again." James nodded. "Okay." But neither of them moved apart. The hours stretched. Then came the knock. A soft chime at the sealed crystal door, followed by muffled voices, tense, Thalin, unmistakably urgent. Alexa stiffened, pulling the furs up over her chest like armor. "There." "Checking on me," she said, her voice suddenly all command again. "They suspect something." James sat up. "What do you want me to do?" She turned to him, eyes sharp now, the warmth tucked back behind polished glass. "Lie still. Say nothing. You are still my prisoner." She rose gracefully, rewrapping herself in the sheer robes of her station. Her hair fell around her like a halo of dark silk. With a flick of her hand, the room brightened. The door shimmered open. 2 guards stood on the other side. "Your Highness," one said. "The council." requests an update. And Prince Wardhack's transport has docked. James felt the words hit Thalexa like invisible arrows. He saw the flinch before she masked it. "Tell them I'll answer in the morning," she said coolly. "For now, I have the prisoner to interrogate." The door sealed again, and Thalexa turned back toward the bed, the furs, and James. But her eyes were different now. They didn't belong to a princess. They belonged to a woman trying to make a choice that could unmake a kingdom. The door hissed shut behind the guards, sealing them in once again. But the silence that followed was nothing like the stillness from before. Princess Thalexa stood near the entryway, still cloaked in her royal robes, her posture perfect and spine straight. But the tension in her shoulders betrayed the storm behind. Her eyes. James sat up slowly on the edge of the bed, his bare feet touching the cold crystalline floor. The warmth of their shared night still lingered on his skin, and in the aching places where her touch had lingered. But now it was evaporating like breath against ice. He spoke softly. "Wardhack, that's the prince you're supposed to bond with, isn't it?" Thalexa didn't look at him. "Yes." The word was clipped, precise, final. "Is it a political match?" "They always are." "Do you love him?" Her head turned slightly, just enough to let him see the anger flicker. Behind her, composure. Not anger at him. Anger at the truth. "I've met him twice," she said. "Once when I was a child. He gave me a necklace made of bones. Said it would remind me of strength." Her voice was flat. He smiled when he said it. James winced. "Sounds romantic." "It's not about romance," she said, walking toward the massive crystal pane window. Beyond it, the storm painted streaks of color through the stars' electromagnetic pulses, scattering across space like dancing ghosts. "It's about legacy, political balance, bloodlines." He rose and joined her, wrapping one of the furs around his shoulders. The cold had settled into the bones of the room again, but neither of them noticed it now. "You know this can't go back to how it was," he said. She turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we crossed a line last night. Whether you want to admit it or not, we're standing on the other side of it now, together." Thalexa's eyes softened, just slightly. "You think this is together?" she asked. "You're a human diplomat accused of espionage. I'm a princess promised to a political alliance older than either of us. What we shared, it was survival. And perhaps foolishness, but not a future." "Maybe not," James said, "but it felt real." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough that their breath mingled again in the chilled air. It was. James reached out and took her hand. She didn't stop him. Her long fingers trembled in his grasp. "Then don't bury it," he said. "Don't. Pretend it didn't happen just because someone expects you to be something you're not." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You make it sound so easy." "I know it isn't, but maybe it should be." She leaned forward, then resting her forehead against his, eyes closing with the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. "If I defy them, I lose everything." "No," he whispered. "You gain you." Before she could answer, the room's light shifted. The walls pulsed crimson. An alert. Thalexa snapped her head toward the nearest console. A display lit up, casting harsh red light across her face. James could see the fear there, raw and immediate. "The council has convened," she said. "There. Summoning me. For judgment?" he asked. "For resolution?" She turned away and began dressing in her formal attire. Layers of sheer robes, woven with threads of silver and blue, glided over her skin like armor. Each piece she put on seemed to dim her, harden her, like she was stepping back into a role that no longer fit. "James," she said without turning around. He stood. "If I walk into that chamber and follow the path expected of me," Her voice broke slightly. And last night dies. We die. Whatever this is ends. He crossed the room and gently caught her arm. Then don't walk that path. She turned to face him, and for the first time, her eyes were brimming with tears. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You don't have to be. Not alone. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not like last night, soft and searching. This was fierce, final, like setting fire to frost and daring it to melt. When she pulled away, her voice was iron. If I can find a way out, will you wait for me? For you, James whispered, his throat tight. Forever. She looked at him like she wanted to believe it could all be that simple. And then she turned, the door opening for her as though it too feared to hold her back. As it sealed closed behind her, James exhaled. She was walking into war. And now, he was no longer just a prisoner. He was her reason to fight. Asterisk. The crystalline corridor outside the princess's quarters glowed dimly as the Lexa strode through it, every step echoing like a hammer blow in the silence of her ship. Her robes swept behind her in fluid arcs of silver and frost blue. But her mind was a storm. The council chamber loomed ahead, a spiraling amphitheater carved from light and ice. The noble houses stood gathered on tiered platforms, their eyes like blades, their silence like judgment. At the center, atop the speaker's dais, stood Prince Wardhack, broad-shouldered, regal and cold-eyed, his presence as calculated as a battle strategy. Princess Thalexa of House Varel, the chief arbiter announced. The council awaits your word. Thalexa stepped into the center of the chamber, spine straight, chin high. I have come, she said. Her voice was calm, but every syllable hummed with restrained power. Wardhack stepped forward. You've delayed your appearance, he said. Twice. I feared your captivity had compromised your sense of duty. She didn't blink. I've delayed for clarity, and I have found it. The chamber stirred. The arbiter lifted a clawed hand. We expect resolution today, Princess. You are to transfer custody of the accused human into the council's hands for sentencing and proceed with your bond to the Northern Territories. Do you comply? Thalexa inhaled once. Then, no. Gasps echoed like breaking crystal. I will not surrender Lieutenant James Rohr, she said. Nor will I proceed with the bonding ceremony. Wardhack's face twisted into something predatory. You defy us? For a warm-blooded trespasser? He is not a trespasser. He is my consort. The words shattered the silence. The arbiter froze. You invoke the old right? I do, she said, steady and unshaken. By royal prerogative, I claim him as personal consort, protected, untouchable. Outrageous, Hack hissed. You would break ancient alliance bonds for an offworlder? Thalexa stepped forward, voice now rising with fire. You call it alliance. I call it arranged servitude. I will not chain myself to another legacy of cold obedience. The chamber roared with disbelief, nobles erupting into furious debate. But none dared move. None dared challenge a declaration made under the banner of royal blood. Furthermore, Thalexa said, silencing them again, Lieutenant Rohr may be the key to our people's survival. The council stilled, like predators scenting something unfamiliar. Our biologists have discovered something extraordinary, she continued. James's body produces thermal patterns our kind cannot replicate. Sustained exposure to his heat stabilizes failing Thalin vitals in low temperatures. His DNA may carry potential for hybrid evolution adaptation to a changing galaxy. He is not a threat. He is a future. The silence was long, frightening. Wardhack spoke last. And what future do you imagine, Thalexa? Offspring? Half-bloods? A diluted line? She looked him dead in the eye. A stronger line. Then she turned and walked out. She didn't run. She didn't wait for permission. She simply left because she could. The chamber did not stop her. Back in her quarters, James stood when the door shimmered open. His heart pounded in his chest when he saw her face, still painted in royal fire. Eyes still sharp, but now softer too. Changed. He stepped toward her. What happened? I broke everything, she said. Good, he said, reaching for her hand. She took it. Then she kissed him, deep, fierce, and full of breathless relief. Chose, she whispered against his lips. I chose you. And he held her like a man who had once been sentenced to death, and now cradled the beginning of something entirely new. Outside the ship, the solar storm faded, leaving stars in its wake. Inside, warmth bloomed not from circuits or systems, but from the oldest source in the universe. Two hearts, beating as one, against the cold. The end.